Welcome to another episode of Tax Leaders Unplugged. Our guest today is Stuart Ramsay. And Stuart is the director and the head of tax at Dubizzle Group, a fast-growing and leading tech player in the MENA region that is gearing towards an IPO. And before Dubizzle, he was group tax manager at DP World, a global ports and logistics operator headquartered in Dubai. And Stuart started his career at PwC, initially in the UK and then in tax M&A in the Dubai office. He has been based in Dubai for over 10 years now. And in this episode today, we will discuss why the UAE and the broader MENA region is on fire tax-wise, and what it takes to be a tax leader in a fast-growing tech company in the region.
This podcast is brought to you by LocTax.
LocTax is an autonomous control center for your global tax operations. It streamlines tax compliance with AI-driven insights and workflow automation. It helps to stay in control of tax risk and controversy management, and this system of action empowers tax teams with real-time analytics and regulatory updates, ensuring proactive business support. LocTax, on top of that, helps in-house teams to keep up with the digitalization that is happening at the site of the tax authorities. Transform your tax function with LocTax and ensure it is future-proof and AI-ready. Welcome, Stuart.
Hi, Stevie. Great to see you. Hope you're well.
Likewise, from your accent, I can tell that you are not from the UAE, that you have something to hide here. Tell us a bit how you ended up in the region and why you and where it all started for you.
Yeah, well, I think with our beards, we could both pass for UAE locals, but certainly not with our accents. You're absolutely right. So, yeah, I'm from Glasgow in Scotland. And I came out to Dubai 10 years ago. And like you said in your very nice intro, thanks very much for that. I came out with PwC, but it all started in Scotland for me. It feels like not a long time ago that I came out here, although it is 10 years. And as you probably know, time can just pass so quickly.
Indeed. Tell us a bit, like, what is it like to live over there compared to the UK? What are the biggest differences, the pros, the cons that you have observed already in the 10 years?
Look, both places have their own unique charms, their own experiences. I think as many people who have come out to the UAE, you're initially attracted to the weather, to the lifestyle, to the lack of income tax, which is one of the best things. But look, it's a very vibrant place to be. It's a very central place globally. It's got a very fast-paced, modern, diverse way of living. Not to say that the UK doesn't, but it's offering something a bit different. And I think sometimes in life you just need that change, that difference. And that's certainly how I felt when I moved here. So, like I say, I'm pleased to be here. The weather's good, the culture's good, and plenty of work for a tax person, which is obviously why we're having this chat.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's the region and the UAE are on fire tax-wise, as I said in the intro. Tell us a bit, like, how are you observing it? How is the overall tax scene developing? Because I know many people over there, and it's so amazing to see the high growth of the overall tax scene, and obviously all the developments that are happening.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a lot happening. I think just to give some background, I guess the GCC, of which the UAE is part, it's not been known for having any real direct taxation for many decades since it was formed. And I think there's been a real shift in that recently. Largely as a diversification away from, oil revenue and that kind of way of building an economy towards more financial services, tourism, and other business activities. So introducing first of all, a value-added tax in 2017, 2018, and now we've come to 2025 where we've just introduced a corporate tax out here as well. So yeah, tax community is really rapidly evolving. People are upskilling. new tax professionals are coming out here, kind of chasing, I was going to say chasing the dream, but chasing the opportunities that are here. You know, there's tons of challenges, but of course, every challenge is an opportunity. So really, yeah, it's creating quite a vibrant market. And I've been busy for, well, I'll say I've been busy for 10 years, but I've really been busy more for the last 2 years, really hammering corporate tax.
Yeah, how was the beginning of the 10 years different from, let's say, the last 2 years? And what is different from your day to day, maybe? And
yeah, I mean, when I came out here, people said, why are you a tax guy going to Dubai? I mean, there's no tax. And I loved that question. It was probably a question I was asked, you know, once a week at least. But the fact was there was tax in other countries, and there was many multinationals headquartered here or based here, or, you know, headquartered in Europe and inbound into the UAE, and they needed advice on structuring. They needed advice on M&A, and there needed to be someone here to do that. There was also a lot of sovereign wealth fund activity, as there still is. So huge sovereign wealth funds in the Gulf investing in Europe, North America, Australia, Asia. And they needed that support from someone who could kind of take care of international tax and understand international tax. And that's really why, you know, advisors in tax existed out here prior to 2017. So that was a great time to come out. It allowed me to focus a bit less on compliance, focus a bit less on tax reporting and all this kind of number stuff, and focus much more on M&A and structuring, and really kind of cut my teeth in those areas. So that was 2014. Moved forward to 2017, the UAE brought in VAT, as the rest of the GCC did. Not a crazy high VAT rate, 5%. But that was really the first time that the region had adopted new tax, and people had to get used to the fact that there was some tax to pay in their day-to-day lives. It's not to say there wasn't tax before. I mean, there was customs duties, and there was various fees, and there was various levies, including on oil and gas and financial services. There was certain levies, but the VAT introduction was really the first time that a tax system as such and a tax authority had been created. And a lot of the hard work that people went through in 2017 to get ready for VAT was really valuable when it came to 2023, 2024, and they had to then address introducing a corporate tax.
And has that culturally in your company and maybe other companies you have worked for, let's say the contacts to the tax friends you're having in other companies, is that culturally changing something? That before it was maybe also only the tax affairs abroad, and now it's also the domestic tax affairs that come into play. Is tax increasing in importance? Is the CFO more interested in it? Tell us a bit.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I think it has been a journey for many businesses out here who very much had there's no tax mindset, a mindset where, you know, you want to do a transaction and you don't have to think about tax. Move assets, do financing, do whatever you want, basically, previously. So there has been this journey of discovery for many multinationals and many local businesses to a realization that tax is actually quite an important driver in the business. And from what I've seen, certainly local businesses have really adapted. Like I said, the introduction of VAT really helped with that push, because I think if the first tax had been a corporate tax, it would have been a very difficult adoption process for local businesses here. Even among things like preparing accounting records and having, you know, financial statements audited and being able to pull the right data from your accounting system, that was previously quite challenging, because there was not really any need to have financial statements other than for your stakeholders or for investors or for banks. you certainly didn't need them for a tax authority. And that whole shift has really happened now, where the tax law says you have to prepare accounts under IFRS, and everyone does now. So there's been a whole industry created around tax technology, accounting technology, data-driven finance functions. And I would say I've seen a lot of tax roles generally advertised and promoted, and businesses really realizing now that their finance team can't also do tax. There's too much tax to do.
Yeah.
So they need to recruit someone to really look after and lead tax. And that depends on the size of the business, whether it's a senior position or more of a middle manager position. But I've seen a lot of tax roles, and I think my fellow tax professionals have as well. So it's so, like I say, it's a really dynamic and interesting time. I don't know if you have any observations of that growth in the UAE from your work.
I can mostly echo what I heard from you, and what I definitely see is indeed that more and more very smart tax brains end up in the region, and now for the first time create greenfield tax departments, install processes, make sure that indirect and direct tax wise they are on top of their game. So that is I imagine these are very, very exciting times for a tax leader like yourself. Coming from outside of the region, what are some of the let's say learnings that you brought into it? How have you observed the start of, you refer to VAT, corporate tax, as an outsider, because you have obviously all that experience from the UK and maybe other countries, because I assume you were internationally working when you were at PwC and maybe your other companies. Tell us a bit like...
Yeah. No, I mean, I think past experience with other corporate tax frameworks has been really invaluable for me in kind of getting to grips with an entirely new tax law. I think having knowledge from the UK, from the Netherlands, Australian tax system, Canadian, US, you see parts of all those tax frameworks in the UAE law. Particularly, I would say the Netherlands and the UK. There's a really strong kind of feeling of comfort for me in reading the UAE tax law. That is very pleasant from my perspective. But that said, the UK tax law is volumes and volumes thick. It's been developed and built over decades, changed every year to a large extent, depending on the politics of the day. The UAE tax law is, let's call it thin by comparison, really. The law itself is very, very brief, and that's supported by various ministerial and cabinet decisions from the government, which kind of set more of the details of the law. And it's been really interesting because to a large extent, the tax law in the UAE has been released in phases. So every couple of weeks, another decision comes or another guide from the Federal Tax Authority comes out, which kind of gives all the tax professionals, a long weekend of reading and understanding the latest developments. Because when the law first was released, you could have sat and brainstormed all the questions you had, and you would get tired before you ran out of questions. And then these decisions came and these guides came, and there's these questions that you have start to get slowly answered. So for me, it's been a super interesting experience to learn about the law, to share with other tax people, my peers, to share our thoughts and our questions and our analysis and our ways of doing things with each other has been really good fun. And having that background in other tax systems has been very, very valuable. But I have to say, one thing I have noticed is that finance people here in the UAE particularly have really embraced the introduction of the new tax law. And many of them are really keen. Maybe they're coming from other countries in the GCC or in the Middle East that didn't have tax as well. But they're really keen to learn and to develop and become experts in their own right in this tax law. So I think having my past experience has been very valuable, but from what I've seen, not entirely necessary if you're a general finance person as well.
Is that something which is different from other countries where, I mean, my in-house experience has always been that for finance, very often tax is not a priority. Some do care a bit, some don't care at all, often for good reasons also, because they are swamped, they have you now say, like, you have the impression that a lot of finance people in the UAE and in the GCC region, they want to step up their tax game, they want to learn. Is that a big difference compared to what you have seen before?
Is it a big difference?
And what could be the reason?
It's quite funny. I'm always really impressed with finance people because of the sheer breadth of stuff they have to cover in their day-to-day roles, right? I mean, it's not just booking journals, that's a bookkeeper, right? But finance people have got treasury stuff, they've got tax stuff, they've got shareholder stuff, investor relations stuff, they've got drafting financial statements, notes, and things like this. Like, I'm always so impressed when I come across an auditor or a finance person at all the stuff they have to cover, and I just have to do tax, right? So for me, it's like the way I look at these finance guys, it's just another string to their bow. I think anyone who gets into the accounting profession or the finance profession, they're keen to keep developing new skills. And so a new tax comes along and they see that as a possible differentiator for them if they have a lot of experience and knowledge in the tax system. That's what they've gone for. So it's been a really cool experience. But you talked about kind of perception of tax in the organization and how much our organization is really getting to grips with the fact that there is tax and being aware. I think it's really mixed. I think the more sophisticated, more multinational organizations are really keen to mitigate tax risks, to be on the front foot, to be compliant, to not have tax audits, to do things right. But some of the more, let's say, local only the domestic businesses, maybe that have been family run previously or still are family run and things are done in a certain way, maybe they're feeling a little bit behind the curve now. But I'm sure, based on what I've seen, they're really trying to catch up and really be ready for filing their first tax returns. And I think most businesses will be filing their first tax returns before kind of Q3 this year.
Yeah. So with the introduction of corporate tax in the UAE recently, what are, in your eyes, the biggest challenges for companies that you have seen? Can it be, by the way, compared to, say, outside of the region, Pillar 2 being dropped, massive shock, a lot of complexity? Does it compare with introduction of corporate tax?
It does, I would say. And, some businesses in the UAE are dealing with both at the same time. So Pillar 2 is dropped, UAE CT is dropped. And actually, there's a lot of synergies that can be found between those things, particularly in relation to data and information. And, if UAE corporate tax wasn't enough to kind of get your act together, then Pillar 2 certainly is the straw that broke the camel's back. Well, Pillar 2 is not really a straw, is it? It's more like a sledgehammer coming in. So yeah, I think any businesses that have both things to address, they've really, really upped their game. So yeah, I see a lot of improvements being made in terms of data, information extraction, doing things right, accounting wise, and that's only positive for the region. It's positive for transparency. It's positive for a business friendly environment. It's positive for the banking system. It's positive for all these good things. So really a great time to be in the region, and lots of improvements are happening.
What are the bigger challenges you have seen when it comes to, in particular, preparation for corporate tax?
I think a couple of things probably. I mean, some some uncertainty. I mean, a lot of uncertainty. I discussed the way that the law has kind of gradually taken shape. So that's kind of created a reasonable amount of uncertainty about how to go about doing things for the first time. You know, your opening balance sheets, your tax accounting. Not to say that those have left kind of lingering problems, but it's been a challenge or a journey of challenges to go through. I think people are quite concerned about compliance. The tax return format came reasonably recently, and it's an online form. It's not a digital upload. It's not like in more sophisticated tax jurisdictions. So navigating that administratively as well as technically is probably what most people are concerned about at this point in time. And then also, look, I mean, we've just finished our first taxable year, which was FY24.
Yeah.
And there are still businesses who are coming to corporate tax relatively recently, and they may have even broached the subject halfway through their first tax year. And so at that point, there was very little time or opportunity to do any kind of planning or preparations, maybe from a structuring perspective or from a data perspective. So I think a lot of businesses' challenges now are really kind of, if they're on the back foot in terms of they should have done something before their first tax period and they didn't. Maybe that could have been something simple like rationalizing the number of entities you have. You know, if you have 100 entities and 100 tax returns to do, that's a lot worse than if you had thought about it and said, I don't need these 100 entities and cut that down before the tax system was effective. So now realizing the fact that you have 100 entities, 100 tax returns, it's a huge amount of work. I think that's the real challenge now, is kind of addressing that overall compliance piece. And then the other thing probably is a little bit of uncertainty around because the law is new, it's not been tested. It's, you know, in the UK, in the Netherlands, and Belgium, in all the other European countries, you know, there's case law that goes back decades. Everything's been tested. There's precedent. There's a lot of transparency around what the intention of the law was, and then what the government of the time wanted the law to mean. So there's all this kind of backup for a tax guy to decide whether the position he's taking is the fair one, is the more likely than not position. Whereas here, the law is very new. It's very black and white, literally. And if you're addressing maybe an M&A situation in the last 12 months or a restructuring situation, you don't quite know how that transaction or that position you've taken will be actually viewed by the tax authority when it comes to reporting it in the tax return. So I think that's the biggest challenge just now. But look, I mean, I think the Ministry of Finance, certainly in the UAE, and the FTA, which is the Federal Tax Authority, have been super in the way that they've approached this and the way that they've really opened themselves up to taxpayers to ask questions, to get clarifications, releasing loads of guides and loads of case studies to kind of work through technical aspects of the law. I think that's been really helpful. And it be challenged. There's going to be challenges and uncertainties, but I think it's gone quite smoothly.
Are there any resources in particular that stand out for you, which you would recommend to the audience when they are in the journey of preparing for corporate tax?
Well,
any websites, newsletters, podcasts, maybe even like something which really helped you and your team?
Yeah, actually, I mean, it's a really good point. I think any in-house tax team should have, a source of technical information. There's IBFD, which is based in the Netherlands. There's Bloomberg, who do a tax portal, and there's a few others, Thomson Reuters. You know, having access to up to the minute viewpoints on tax, up to the minute legislation, tax treaties, etc., is really valuable, and even more so if you're now in a taxing regime.
Yeah.
So we've certainly utilized those a lot, and to a large extent, you can rely on that information. I think something that's really been pushed in the UAE is not to take tax decisions based on hearsay and rumors, or on maybe people's views on social media. Like, read the law if you want an answer. Read the guides from the Ministry of Finance and the FTA, because largely your question will be answered by those guides, and following someone else's viewpoint, whether right or wrong, might get you into the wrong situation. So certainly finding resources is really valuable. I haven't listened to any particular podcasts, only yours. So that's not helped me in my corporate tax journey.
Which will not be so helpful given the focus of the podcast. But are there any industry groupings or, like, say, in-house groupings you are part of that could be interesting for the audience that want to do a more technical deep dive in the topic?
So mainly informal, but I think the big four here have really stepped up. I mean, not just the big four, beyond the big four as well. The firms, the advisory firms, have really grown their practices around business tax or corporate tax. They're putting on a lot of seminars, webinars, conferences, sending out a lot of mail shots and updates, snapshots in time to their clients, but also to not their clients. You know, if you sign up with the Big Four for their tax mailing list, you know, you'll get a lot of information quickly, firsthand, and in a way that you want it. So, you know, every other day I'm getting something from PwC, Deloitte, EY, KPMG, and others, with announcements or insights into things that I wasn't aware of because I'm too busy doing my job. So this is really valuable, you know, especially recently around Pillar 2. A lot of happenings have been going on. We had the UAE Pillar 2, essentially the full framework was released about 2 weeks ago. And all of my insight into that came through emails from Big Four or from LinkedIn posts and things like this. So there's a whole breadth of options to be informed. And then there's the social side as well. Like, I mean, like I said before, there's more and more tax people coming to the region. There's more and more tax people in the region. So multiple opportunities to network and share ideas and share thoughts. And that's been really fun, certainly for the last couple of years.
Yeah, that is exactly what I experienced when I was there. I think the last time, say a year ago, that there is so much like activity outside of work where tax people come together. Dinners, whatever, events.
I remember, Stevie, we had a really nice dinner when you came last time. I don't know what was that your first time in Dubai?
That was my first time. Yeah, exactly. So we
had dinner beside the Burj Khalifa, so you really got the newbie experience correct in Dubai.
Yeah, it was. I think I ticked all the boxes of being for a first time in the region in Dubai, and then seeing all the highlights. But as I said, really was impressed about the development of the in-house tax scene and the overall energy that I could observe there. So that was great to see. Do you think that the introduction of corporate tax has an impact on the competitiveness of the region of the UAE? Is that of any impact? Is that something you observe or hear about?
It's something I've talked to a lot of people about, and I've also, I guess, philosophized a little bit about. I think I wouldn't call it a negative impact. I think it's probably the opposite. I think it's a positive impact. I mean, it might sound counterintuitive, you know, introduce a tax and make things better for business. But when you look at the way the global tax landscape has gone with Pillar 2, with Pillar 1, with, you know, the EU in particular really focusing on, for example, public country-by-country reporting, and lots of tax advocacy groups really outing large multinationals who they believe are avoiding tax. Having a tax system in the UAE kind of became a necessity rather than a want, because the perception of the UAE was taking such a hit from a business perspective, that it was a tax haven, that it was another Cayman Islands or a Bermuda, and governments, I would say largely mostly in the EU, they began to put a lot of blocks in place, a lot of they didn't want their businesses in their countries eroding their tax base by shifting things to the UAE.
Yeah.
So the UAE bringing in a tax, I think, was really crucial. And in doing so, I think it's really created a great deal of transparency. We talked before about people upping their game, upping their systems, upping their reporting. And that's only a positive, I think, for business competitiveness. And you also have to look at the UAE as a country. You know, we talked before, it's a very modern country. The infrastructure is excellent. The positioning globally, both from a time zone and a geographic perspective, is fantastic. It's got lots of space to expand, to build, and you know, you come here, it feels like a construction site almost everywhere you go, and that's because, you know, the country has something else to offer, not just zero tax. And yeah, like I say, I think bringing in a tax was only the right thing to do. And businesses haven't really become upset about it. They haven't. There hasn't been a backlash against the tax coming in. It's a 9% corporate tax, still comparatively to almost every other country in the world. It's a low corporate tax, which, you know, and again, I've worked with lots of multinationals and worked in lots of multinationals. If you tell me that my business in X country is going to have a 9% corporate tax rate, I'll be very, very happy.
No, I get that. Let's look a bit at your careers too. So you obviously already explained the transition from the UK to the UAE, but you're now working for a fast-growing tech company. You used to work for other companies before, including advisory. I think you before worked at DP World as well. How was the move from DP World into Dubizzle? How did you experience that? Was it a shock? Tell us a bit.
Yeah, well, was it a shock? It's a very different animal. I mean, DP World, for anyone who knows it, is a massive multinational in heavy logistics, ports, terminals, marine services. So that the nature of that business is very different to the nature of the business that I'm in now, which is essentially a prop tech / technology classifieds website company operating in multiple countries. But then, you know, I've often talked to peers about this, about working in a finance function or working in a tax function, is that at the end of the day, you still just see a load of numbers on a page, right? Whether it's the P&L or the balance sheet or the tax risks or the tax payable, all the tax metrics are the same largely. But the more you understand the business, the better you can be at managing the tax of that business. So yeah, coming into a tech company, it was very different, but I kind of took the opportunity to really just grab it, you know, by the neck and try to understand as much about the new business as I could in the early days, meet as many people as I could, really probe and ask questions about the tax situation, you know, whether there's concerns amongst management about certain tax aspects or certain finance aspects, any concerns around compliance and risks and reporting and audits, and really just get in there and absorb as much as I could before stepping back and then having a think about how I want to build my tax function to address the needs of the business. But yeah, I often think about, you know, moving from DP World. I think DP World has in the region of 50,000 employees, 50 to 60,000 employees globally, whereas this business is much smaller than that, maybe 5,000. But for me, it was very much about, it was a step down in terms of business size, but it was a step up in terms of responsibility for tax. So having something smaller to look after and to make my own was really exciting for me. And that opportunity to come in and build a tax function from scratch, that was really the driver for my move. So I wasn't fearing it, I was kind of embracing it, is the answer.
Do you mean with the step up in responsibility also the step up in impact that attracted you? Coming from like very large to smaller, where you're then building a greenfield tax department, is that impact related?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I certainly feel now that my role has more impact on the business. And that's probably because in a huge multinational with thousands of people in each country, with finance functions in each country, the reliance on the group function for tax is really around strategy. It's around best practice and maybe dealing with, let's call it, higher value tax issues, but the day-to-day run-of-the-mill stuff is dealt with in country by the local finance teams and sometimes even local tax people or tax teams. For me now, everything tax comes to me. So if it's a tax query in Egypt or a financing thing in Saudi or you name it, if there's a tax question, it comes to me first. So I find myself doing, in a good way, I find myself doing much more day-to-day tax and fielding much more day-to-day questions about tax. But my answers then go on to drive commercial decisions. And I think that was not so much the case in my old role. Both good roles, both great roles, but just in a very different way. Your impact, you feel your impact on the business. Yeah.
I can imagine it, like when I was in-house, I worked at different types of companies, and I also was once the one and only tax guy in an organization.
Yeah.
Impact is the positive side of things, but I also had like doubts, uncertainties, maybe fear, because to your point, all things tax come to you. You need to give an advice, take a position, and the business will run with it, will go with it. How have you dealt with that? Were you also like dealing with fears and uncertainties? Is that something that wasn't great?
Stevie, it's super challenging because, in tax, like there's not always a clear answer. It can be very nuanced. It can be, very, you have to consider some technical things very carefully, and the advice you give has to be very thoughtfully given.
Yeah.
And when you're dealing with a young, fast-growing tech company, things have to happen quickly. We have to make moves. We have to pivot. We have to get things where we want them. And there's kind of sometimes not enough time to take as long as you would want over a tax question. You know yourself, no one can know everything about all taxes. No tax person does. That you have to get advice. You have to socialize with your network sometimes and ask people's opinions and experiences, or even go a step further and go to an advisor and commission a piece of work where they really look into the detail and they come back to you with a view or an opinion. So, pardon me. So in a tech company, especially a fast-growing one, sometimes there's not time for that. So you have to take a view, and that can be tough. But, I think all through my career, I've developed this ability to look at what's relevant, absorb what's relevant, take various pieces of information, various viewpoints, and come to a decision myself. So I kind of rely on my experience when it comes to these things. If I feel that I'm being pushed to give an answer I'm not able to give, then I say stop. We need to take time here. We need to think this through carefully.
Yeah.
And that would be advice I would give to anyone as well in any role, but particularly in tax. If you feel you need to take something more carefully and to really, if you're worried about it causing a problem, then you should take that time.
Yeah. Is that also the same as saying at a certain point, or not be afraid to say, I don't know the answer?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm sure in lock tax, Stevie, you're a good boss. You've probably told people, you can tell me you don't know the answer, right? Whether it's let's do a new product, let's do the coding, and someone says, I don't know how to do
I need
that.
to say it all the time. I don't know the answer.
I love people who say it. I tell people all the time, I have a daughter, I tell her, look, if you don't know the answer, don't try and act like you do, because it comes off really badly. Everyone can tell, right? And they actually respect you more if you say you don't know. And I love, I think actually I learned this story back in PwC, back in the UK. I remember being this kind of young hotshot new graduate in the office, and really desperately wanting to come off as credible and knowledgeable, and someone told me one day, like, if you don't know the answer, don't nod along, don't try to give an answer. It's okay to say you don't know. And I've taken that all through my career, and I have to do it even as a head of tax. I have to do it sometimes. Or I can say I kind of know the answer, but I'm not confident, and I need to go and think about it and come back to you with a proper answer. And I think that garners respect in all professions.
I like that a lot, because indeed it's better to say you don't know than that you try to come up with something and then need to come back on it later on. And I also like that you refer to how you apply it with your daughter, with your kids maybe, because it's indeed something, it's a very good characteristic to just be able to say, I don't know. We need to look it up. We need to analyze it, and
Yeah.
we'll come back to you.
And,
But
and it's, if you say you don't know and then you show no interest in finding out the answer, that's ignorance, right? But if you say you don't know and then you use your skills to be able to know, then that's really what makes someone stand out, I think, for me.
what would you, other than what you already said, advise to people that, just like yourself, are moving into a company where there is maybe a greenfield tax department or a small tax department? They are shaping it up, they are building it out. What are like your most important recommendations based on your experience, how to get started with putting tax on the map and developing the tax function?
I think I've always said I have this concept of a mini tax due diligence, so when I joined Dubizzle Group, I kind of had this first month roadmap to really understand the business, understand its operations, understand the tax. Where are the risks? Where are the opportunities? Where are the question areas? And kind of with an M&A hat on, kind of do a tax due diligence of the business. So really test, are we filing our tax returns on time? Are we paying tax on time? Do we have the right people looking at those tax returns before they go in? Do we have tax audits, or maybe we don't, but we have a lot of uncertain tax positions, for example? Getting an assessment of where they are, which countries, what they look like, what the numbers look like. And then I guess then stepping back and saying, okay, what does my tax function have to look like now to address this due diligence report that I've just prepared on my own company? So that's kind of my approach whenever I've gone into a new in-house role, is to kind of really get that understanding of the business first, and then decide how to address any issues that have come out of that. So for me, I came in, I kind of firefighted for the first couple of weeks because the tax guy had arrived and they've been looking for a tax guy. So I was finding myself getting all kinds of VAT questions, and I'm not a VAT specialist, and all kinds of transfer pricing questions and all the rest of it, which was great. I mean, that was super. But one thing that helped me do was to realize that I needed a VAT specialist in my team, and I probably needed someone who was really kind of comfortable with transfer pricing and tax accounting and all the numbers work. So that's what I did. I recruited someone to do the VAT part, and that's worked out fantastically well. As I kind of mentioned before, no one can know all things about tax, and even as a head of tax, I readily admit that when I joined Dubizzle, VAT was my kind of weak area. I didn't do VAT when I was in PwC. Implemented VAT in the UAE when it came in, but I wasn't like at the forefront of that work. So admitting to myself that I don't know everything about VAT was really valuable. Bringing someone in to support me on that. And I would say I have learned a huge amount about VAT in the last couple of years that I didn't know before. So building out the tax function from nothing, really tough, but actually really nice kind of roadmap. You build yourself a roadmap. This is what I want my tax function to look like. And then you get started and you recruit and you draft policies and you draft strategies, and you, even from deciding how you want to look after your information as a tax function, how do you want to share with the business insights about tax, maybe doing webinars or lunch and learns or sending out emails, snapshot updates, just to inform the business about what's happening from a tax perspective, new developments that are on the horizon, etc. So all of that stuff is really fun. And when you have a blank canvas to work from, it's really nice. It feels like yours when you go home at night.
Yeah, no, I like it a lot. And in particular, the mini tax due diligence resonates a lot. Very nice that you coined it also that way. I think even it can be valuable to existing tax teams to every now and then do such a due diligence. Also, you refer to identifying the blind spots, like where are things which I cannot do well, but maybe also in the team, what are the blind spots, and cover up for them. I like that a lot. No, I think you shared quite some valuable insights here, Stuart. So many thanks for that. Before we come to the end, I typically would want to raise one more question. You already shared as a rule of thumb, it's okay to admit that you don't know, and I love that. I love it. But is there anything else you want to share with the audience here in terms of your piece of advice for excelling in their tax careers towards, let's say, think about people that maybe one day want to be in your shoes, that want to move into the region or stay in their regions, but want to become a tax leader in their company? What is your one piece of advice we haven't heard yet?
And I wanted to give you two, okay? But look, I mean, we touched on it, but there's kind of two aspects to being a tax professional, right? There's technical and interpersonal. You can't be just one or the other. You can't be so technical that you can't talk to people and give ideas and present information in a way that non-tax people will understand. And you can't be too much interpersonal and social and not have a clue about the technical side of things. So my advice really to any tax professional, especially one who wants to go in-house, is really finding that balance. And if you feel deficient in one of those two things, then that's where you need to work on. So if you're really strong technically and everyone regards you so well for your interpretation of the law or for, extracting guidance, but you're not so good at, presenting a concept to someone who's not in tax, then that's where you need to focus your development. And I've had times in my career where I've gone both ways. Sometimes I've felt really strong technically, but I've felt like I need some work on my soft skills. And then sometimes I've felt the opposite. I've felt really comfortable and confident to sit in a room with executives and talk openly, but then have doubts about, I don't really understand enough about what I'm talking about. So, and I'm happy to admit that, because everyone should feel that way at some point in their life, especially when you're put on the spot. You've done a day of work on an analysis and you think you understand it through and through, and then you give it to the CFO or the CEO and they rip you apart in 3 minutes. Like being able to handle those situations, both interpersonally and technically, is where you will be challenged in the future.
Sorry that I interrupt. Do you think that the dual focus on hard skills, the technical skills and the soft skills, that it would be impacted by now having AI and the chat GPTs available to all of us? Is the technical part now the easier part, and should we focus more all on the soft skills, or does it remain the same?
It remains the same, I think, Stevie. I'm a big fan of AI, of generative AI, and using it to help me day to day. But and I've spent a lot of time working, trying to train an AI model to tell me about the tax law, and it's not quite there yet. I think it will be there very soon. The pace of change is there, and having a not just an advisor in your AI, but a team of advisors giving you insights into the tax law or into whatever you're asking. It is going to change things, but ultimately we're still a long way off from not needing a person to interpret and to test concepts based on their experience and their technical education and all the rest of it that comes with being a tax guy. But it's an interesting question, and I'm loving how every time you have a conversation with someone these days, AI comes into it. But
sorry for doing that. I couldn't hold myself.
And we've talked about AI a lot. I know, the two of us, but I use AI for so many things now that I never used it for before.
Yeah,
I didn't have an opportunity before. If I get a document that's entirely in Arabic and I think it's a tax return, we have an in-house AI tool that keeps our information safe and secure, and I can use that to translate a tax return. And if I go back just a couple of years, I would have had to decide if it was really necessary to translate it, send it off to a translation firm, pay a couple of $100, get it back, look at it, decide that it wasn't worth translating in the first place. Now, in 15 seconds, I can translate that document, and really that's changed a lot for me. Asking questions about tax and learning about prompt engineering and how to get what you want out of AI has been super interesting. And I think every finance team, certainly in my experience and the people I've talked to, every finance team is kind of excited and asking each other, how can we use AI to improve what we're doing? And, when you get a lot of people excited about something and everyone's kind of starting to put some activity into a concept, it can go really fast. I don't know what you guys are doing. I know that you guys are working on building AI functionality into LockTax, and that must be an exciting time for you as well.
100%. I kind of disrupted your train of thought a bit with bringing up the AI topic here, but you said you also had a second piece of advice, like next to the investing in hard and soft skill. What is your second thing you wanted to share?
Yeah. So the second, well, you asked for one. Okay, no, I will give you the second. Honestly, it's about being adaptable and embracing change. I think you really can fail quite quickly as a tax guy if you are stuck in your ways and you only do things the way that you learned to do them a few years ago. Like, everything's changing now in tax.
Yeah.
Pillar 2, we've talked about tax technology, AI, changing politics around the world are really changing the shape of tax systems. In Europe, over the last couple of years, we've had DAC 6, we've had country by country reporting, which is now becoming public. We've got e-invoicing, we've got, the list goes on, right? You know it. And if you're not adapting and embracing that change, then you're kind of going backwards. So I think that's my second piece of advice. Maybe that's a really obvious thing. I don't know what you think.
No, I think it's not so obvious. I like it. I'm just curious, how do you do it? How do you make sure that you remain flexible, open-minded, agile? I don't know how to call it, but because there is so much change, is there any specific practical nugget you have?
Yeah, well, I think being able to embrace change it starts with understanding that change. So I think just being really curious and really interested in learning about things, understanding new concepts. So, for example, e-invoicing is coming in the UAE. I like to think I'm a fairly technical guy, but probably not when it comes to delivering invoices to people electronically. APIs, systems integrations, all this. I'm not that
Yeah.
technical guy, right? So, I decided to go and teach myself a bit more about this stuff and talk to our systems guys. We have a financial systems team in the business. Ask them how practically we will go about this and start to have working sessions on it. And, by educating myself, I'm already embracing the change. I'm already preparing to adapt to that change. So I think it starts there. And the other thing is not to become overwhelmed. There's so many concepts and changes in tax that it can feel quite overwhelming at some times. But everyone's in the same position. If you're a head of tax and you feel overwhelmed, then maybe you need a bigger team. And if you're a younger tax professional and you feel overwhelmed, then you're always supported by other people. Then the buck never just stops with you to know all this stuff. And as I said, I think twice now, no one can know everything about every tax, and you shouldn't. And that goes back to the interpersonal skills and being able to share ideas and concepts and talk to your network and hear what other people have to say about things is usually the fastest way to get an answer, instead of sitting on Google and trying to work it out yourself.
Yeah. Very, very clear. And I think it will resonate a lot with the audience. So thanks a lot, Stuart, for the very thoughtful conversation. I liked it a lot. I hope the same is true for yourself. And thanks again for being on the podcast today.
Thank you, Stevie. It's been super.